The final battle begins. The galaxy trembled as the alien empire moved forward with ruthless efficiency. They had already conquered planets, wiping out entire civilizations, and now Earth was their next target. The skies above the Earth had turned dark, with massive alien ships hovering ominously over cities. Their technology was far more advanced than anything the humans had ever seen. The aliens' weapons were destructive, and their soldiers were unlike any force the humans had ever faced. In the heart of a once thriving city, now a war zone, human soldiers were preparing for what seemed like an inevitable defeat. The sound of gunfire and explosions echoed in the streets, filling the air with the stench of smoke and burning ruins. Buildings that had once been symbols of human achievement were now nothing more than rubble. People scrambled for cover, desperately trying to hold on to whatever hope they had left. Among the chaos stood John, a soldier who had been fighting since the very beginning. His face was grim, his uniform dirty and torn, but his eyes burned with determination. He had seen his comrades fall, their bodies lying lifeless on the ground, but he refused to let it break him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting everything humans had worked for, everything they believed in. "Hold the line," shouted his commanding officer as alien ships landed, releasing waves of soldiers armed with deadly weapons. John's grip tightened on his rifle, his heart racing. The odds were stacked against them, but he wouldn't back down. He was human, and that alone gave him strength. He glanced around, seeing his fellow soldiers preparing for the oncoming attack. Fear was in their eyes, but there was also something else, a spark of defiance. As the alien forces advanced, John could feel the ground shake beneath his feet. He saw the aliens' war machines moving in, their monstrous shapes towering over human defenses. Each machine seemed invulnerable to anything humans could throw at them. But still, they fought. With each blast, with every destroyed building, they'd fought back. It was all they could do. Suddenly, the alien leader's voice boomed over loudspeakers, cutting through the noise of battle. "Surrender now, humans. Your resistance is futile." It echoed through the streets, a final warning before the aliens launched their ultimate assault. John felt the weight of those words. They had been hearing this for days. The aliens thought they had already won. But John wasn't so sure. The human spirit was stronger than the aliens could ever understand. Humans didn't fight because they had the best weapons or the strongest armor. They fought because they never gave up. That was the difference. It was something the aliens had never accounted for, something they would soon regret underestimating. John's mind raced. He thought about his family, his friends, the world they had all once known. He thought about everything he had lost in this war. But most importantly, he thought about the one thing that set humans apart from the rest of the galaxy: their resilience. The aliens didn't know it yet, but that one quality would change everything. As the alien forces began to charge, John knew there was little time. This was it, the moment of truth. He had to act fast. But what could one man do against such overwhelming odds? That's when it hit him. He had been taught something during his training that no one had ever paid much attention to. A rule, a simple one, but something that had stayed with him. The aliens didn't know about this rule, and that was their mistake. They thought they had already won. With a look of determination, John turned to his comrades. "Fall back to the secondary position," he ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. They didn't question him. They didn't have time to. They just followed his lead, retreating to a better defensive position. The aliens wouldn't know what was coming. John had a plan. But he didn't tell anyone what he was thinking. Not yet. It was too early. The rule had to stay a secret, at least for now. He needed time, and he had to use his mind as much as his weapons. This was the human way. No matter how bad the situation got, they never gave up. And John wasn't going to start now. The alien ships descended, their weapons aimed at the last standing human defenses. The ground shook as explosions rocked the area, sending debris flying. John could hear the distant screams of civilians and soldiers alike, but he pushed those thoughts aside. His focus was on one thing: survival and revenge. As the battle raged on, John silently made his way toward the central command station. He was not going to sit idly by and let the aliens destroy Earth. He had something up his sleeve, something they wouldn't expect. The aliens thought they had the upper hand, but they had no idea what was about to happen. With each step, John felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. It was now or never. The human race's fate rested in his hands, and he was ready to prove that, even in the face of certain defeat, humans would always fight back. The battle had only just begun, and the aliens had no idea that their biggest mistake was about to become their undoing. The one rule: the war was not over. The alien forces advanced, their war machines pushing forward with brutal efficiency, leaving destruction in their wake. John had seen it all. Their unstoppable weapons, their towering soldiers, and their cold, emotionless leadership. Yet, as he crouched in the shadows, waiting for the right moment, he couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens had made a fatal mistake. His mind raced back to his training, to the moment when the instructors had drilled something into him that seemed almost too simple at the time. It was a rule they had all heard but never truly understood. Rule number 1: never underestimate the will to survive. John had never paid much attention to it before, but now it was all that mattered. The aliens had come to Earth, believing that they had all the power, that their technology and numbers would be enough to crush the human resistance. But what they didn't realize was that humans were capable of fighting with more than just weapons. They fought with their hearts, their minds, and an unbreakable will. The alien leader, General Vrack, had delivered his warning over the loudspeakers just moments before, taunting the humans with their supposed doom. But to John, it only fueled his determination. The aliens hadn't seen the depths of human strength. They hadn't experienced the one thing that made humanity so unique. In the midst of the battle, John found himself face to face with a group of alien soldiers, their glowing weapons raised, ready to fire. They had already wiped out most of the nearby human soldiers, and now they were advancing on him. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. But John didn't flinch. He knew exactly what he had to do. He wasn't going down without a fight. "You don't understand, do you?" John muttered under his breath as he pulled out an old, forgotten device from his belt, a relic from an earlier war, something most people would have discarded. It wasn't much, but it was a reminder of the human's ability to adapt and survive. And that, he knew, was what rule number 1 was all about. The aliens aimed their weapons at him, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The tension in the air was palpable. But John stood tall, his face determined. He didn't care that he was outnumbered. He didn't care that the aliens had better technology. He had something far more powerful than their advanced weapons: human ingenuity. "Rule number 1 is what will destroy you," John said aloud, his voice steady, though his heart raced. He knew the aliens couldn't understand. They couldn't grasp the meaning of the rule. It wasn't something they could measure with their scanners or analyze with their computers. It was something the aliens had never been able to replicate. And then, just as the alien soldiers prepared to fire, John activated the device. A bright flash of light erupted from it, temporarily blinding the alien soldiers. The shockwave from the blast sent them stumbling backward, momentarily disoriented. The moment of hesitation was all John needed. He dove into action, using the device's power to disable their weapons and create confusion within their ranks. The aliens' coordinated assault faltered as they scrambled to regain control of their technology. They had underestimated humans once again. While the aliens were distracted, John quickly took advantage of their weakness. He knew that the aliens, with all their power, lacked something vital: the will to survive at any cost. They fought because they were ordered to, but humans fought because they had everything to lose. As the chaos unfolded around him, John realized something profound. The aliens had never thought to look beyond their technology, beyond their weapons. They believed that sheer power would crush humanity's spirit, but they had forgotten that humans didn't fight for the same reasons. They'd fought for each other, for their families, and for their future. They fought because it was in their nature to never give up, no matter the odds. John's heart pounded as he made his way through the wreckage, cutting down alien soldiers one by one. His mind remained focused, but his thoughts kept returning to rule number 1. Never underestimate the will to survive. He could see it now. The aliens might have thought they were on the brink of victory, but they were wrong. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future, and humanity would not lose. In the distance, General Vrak watched the unfolding chaos, his expression one of disbelief. He had never encountered a species that refused to accept defeat. The humans' actions, their unwavering resistance, were beginning to gnaw at him. What was it about them? What was it that made them keep fighting when all seemed lost? Vrak's gaze narrowed as he tried to assess the situation. The humans had managed to disrupt their operations, but the alien leader was far from ready to admit failure. The battle wasn't over yet, but deep inside, he knew something was shifting. He had never before encountered an enemy like this, one that fought not because it was ordered to, but because it had no other choice. John moved with purpose through the wreckage, his thoughts still on rule number 1. The aliens hadn't accounted for humanity's greatest strength. It wasn't their technology, their weapons, or even their numbers. It was their resilience, the one thing the aliens would never understand, and that would be their downfall. A rule forgotten. As the battle raged on, John could see the tide beginning to shift. The alien forces, although numerous and technologically superior, were starting to falter. Their once perfect strategies had been disrupted by the unexpected resistance from the humans, led by a soldier who was only one man. But John knew this was only the beginning. The aliens hadn't fully grasped what was happening. They still underestimated the human will to survive. The flashes of light and the sounds of explosions were deafening. John's heart was pounding in his chest as he moved from one enemy to the next. Despite the chaos, his mind remained focused. He couldn't afford to get distracted. The one rule was working. It was the key to turning the battle in their favor. The alien invaders had assumed that they could defeat humanity by brute force alone, but they had forgotten something crucial. Humans could endure far more than they could ever imagine. John's thoughts returned to that simple, yet powerful, rule. Rule number 1. Never underestimate the will to survive. The aliens had been too focused on their overwhelming power, thinking that they were the ultimate force in the universe. But they had ignored the one thing they couldn't measure: human spirit. The aliens thought they could crush humanity, but they hadn't understood the depths of what humans were willing to sacrifice, or the cleverness they could employ to win against impossible odds. Back at the alien command center, General Vrak seethed with frustration. He had watched his forces struggle to regain control of the battlefield, and he could feel the weight of the mistake beginning to bear down on him. His pride had been wounded, but his rage was growing. He had never encountered an enemy that refused to surrender when all seemed lost. This human soldier, John, had shown them the one thing that was impossible to break: hope. Vrak's mind raced as he analyzed the situation. Something was off. The humans had not given up, not even when the alien forces began to methodically dismantle their defenses. And the more Vrak thought about it, the more he realized that the humans weren't simply trying to survive. They were fighting for something greater. It was the rule, that rule that John had mentioned. What is it about this rule? Vrak muttered to himself. What could it be? He replayed John's words in his mind, searching for the clue that would unravel the mystery. They had made a critical error, he realized. He had assumed the humans' fighting spirit was limited, that they could be conquered by force. He had failed to account for the deep-rooted tenacity that humans carried within them, a kind of stubbornness that went beyond logic and technology. The rule John had spoken of was the key to humanity's strength. It was not a tactical advantage. It was not a weapon. It was something deeper, something that couldn't be explained by numbers or science. It was humanity's resolve. As John made his way through the battlefield, his mind kept returning to that same thought. The aliens had underestimated the depth of human ingenuity and resolve. What they didn't understand was that survival was not just a matter of physical strength. It was a matter of mindset. Flashbacks flooded John's mind. He remembered growing up as a child, being taught about humanity's history, how humans had faced countless threats and challenges throughout the ages. They had survived wars, natural disasters, and the darkest periods of history. But what had always kept them going was their ability to adapt, to think outside the box, and to never, ever give up. It wasn't just about winning the battle. It was about something much bigger. It was about the will to keep fighting, no matter how hard the odds. As John made his way closer to the alien command center, he could hear the faint sounds of alien chatter on his communications device. The aliens were getting nervous. They were starting to realize that their perfect strategy had failed. They thought they had humanity on the brink of collapse, but now they were facing an enemy they couldn't easily defeat. John smiled to himself. He knew what they were forgetting. The aliens might have superior technology, but they lacked one crucial thing: the heart and spirit of humanity. And that was something they could never replicate. It was that one rule, simple but powerful, that had carried humans through the darkest of times, and it was about to change everything. As the battle continued, John knew that the aliens would have to adapt quickly. Their confidence was beginning to crack, and their leadership was starting to falter. They didn't understand what was happening, but the humans did. It wasn't just about fighting with weapons or strategy. It was about fighting with everything they had left. With the device he had activated earlier, John had bought enough time to send a signal to the remaining human forces, rallying them to keep fighting. But he couldn't let up. The war wasn't won yet. As the aliens regrouped and prepared for another attack, John knew the moment of truth was near. This was the moment they would all remember. The turning point when humanity's will to survive proved stronger than alien power. The rule had never been more important. It was a rule that the aliens would learn the hard way, and it would lead to their downfall. John's mission was clear: to prove that humans could survive anything, even when all seemed lost. The power of humanity. John knew that time was running out. The alien forces were regrouping, ready to launch their next wave of destruction. But he wasn't afraid. At least, not in the way most people would expect. This was the moment. The moment when humanity's greatest strength would shine through. The power of human ingenuity was about to change the course of this war. The aliens had counted on the fact that they were the superior species. They had technology beyond human understanding, weapons capable of wiping out entire cities in seconds, and soldiers trained for war. But there was something they hadn't anticipated: humanity's ability to think outside the box, to survive not just with brute force, but with creativity and resilience. John moved swiftly through the battlefield, taking advantage of the chaos around him. He had to make it to the alien command center, where the true heart of their operation lay. If he could disable their communications and disrupt their control, it would throw the entire alien force into disarray. It was a risky move, but it was the only chance they had. As he crept through the rubble of the once proud city, John reflected on the human strength he had come to rely on. Humanity had always found a way to survive, through innovation, collaboration, and sheer determination. Whether it was building makeshift shelters in a destroyed city or coming up with clever ways to fight back when the odds were stacked against them, humans had always found a way. That was rule number one in action. The alien command center loomed ahead. It was heavily guarded, but John had anticipated that. He didn't need to fight his way in. He just needed to get to the heart of the operation, where he could cause the most damage. He'd been preparing for this moment since the first day of the invasion. He had been gathering intelligence, studying alien technology, learning how it worked, and finding its weaknesses. And now he had an idea, one that could turn the tide of the war in their favor. John reached into his bag and pulled out a small, seemingly insignificant device, a device that had been developed by a group of human engineers who had survived the initial alien attack. It wasn't much on its own, but when combined with the human ingenuity John had learned to harness, it became a powerful tool. The device was capable of interfacing with alien technology and disrupting its core systems, rendering their weapons and communications useless. He took a deep breath and activated the device. Immediately, the alien command center was flooded with a series of strange signals. The air buzzed with the sound of malfunctioning equipment, and the alien guards in the area began to panic. Their once seamless communication systems faltered, and their advanced weapon systems started to glitch. The aliens didn't know it yet, but they had just lost control. John smiled grimly as he watched the chaos unfold. The aliens had never expected humans to be able to infiltrate their systems like this. They had always believed their technology was foolproof, impenetrable. But human creativity had shattered that belief. The power of humanity's mind, its ability to adapt and overcome, was something that the aliens could never match. The alien forces scrambled to restore order, but it was too late. The disruptions in their systems had already started to affect their troops on the ground. Their coordinated attacks faltered, their once perfect strategies falling apart as their soldiers struggled to regain control. John quickly relayed the signal to the remaining human forces. The moment had come. The aliens were disoriented, vulnerable. Humanity had seized an opportunity to strike back. The war was no longer a losing battle. It had become a fight they could win. The human soldiers rallied around John's signal. They surged forward with newfound energy, pushing back against the alien invaders. The alien forces were unprepared for the sudden counterattack. The humans fought not just for survival, but for something greater. They fought for their future, for their families, and for their world. John continued his mission, using every ounce of his training and every piece of the puzzle he had assembled. Each step he took was a testament to human resilience. The aliens had thought they were invincible, but now they were witnessing the raw power of humanity, a power that couldn't be measured by technology or strength alone. It was the power of the human spirit. But John knew this was only the beginning. The aliens were still dangerous, still relentless. The fight was far from over. The alien forces were starting to regroup, trying to fix their broken systems and regain control. But for now, humanity had the upper hand. They had disrupted the enemy's plans, and that was a victory in itself. As the battle intensified, John couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Humanity had come together in a way the aliens could never have predicted. They had turned the tide, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the most determined. They had survived the worst the universe could throw at them, and they would continue to fight. The aliens were learning the hard way that rule number one wasn't just a rule. It was a philosophy, a way of life. The humans didn't just fight to survive. They fought to protect everything they loved. And in that fight, they would never stop. As the battle raged on, John moved forward, knowing that humanity had one more card to play. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for victory. And with the power of human ingenuity and will, they just might win this war after all. Turning the tables, John could feel the momentum shifting with every passing minute. The once confident alien forces, so sure of their victory, were now struggling to maintain control. Their machines had been disrupted, their communications were down, and their soldiers were scrambling to regroup. The human resistance, ignited by a single spark of ingenuity, was proving stronger than anything the aliens had expected. The sound of alien weapons misfiring echoed in the streets as the human soldiers surged forward, pushing the enemy back. The alien leader, General Vrak, was starting to lose his composure. His face, once filled with confidence, was now a mask of frustration. He had underestimated the human spirit, and now it was costing him dearly. The alien forces had never faced an opponent like this, an opponent that refused to surrender, no matter how bleak the odds. John knew this wasn't the time to let up. They had the upper hand, but the alien forces were still formidable. It was now or never. If they didn't strike quickly, the aliens would recover and fight back with everything they had. John had already disrupted their command center, but it wasn't enough. He needed to ensure that they couldn't regain control of their systems. The alien leadership had to be dismantled, once and for all. The city was a war zone, filled with crumbling buildings, smoke, and fire. The ground beneath John's feet was slick with mud and debris, but he didn't care. He was focused. He had a mission to complete, and he wasn't about to let anything stop him. This was humanity's moment, and he couldn't afford to waste it. John's squad had rallied, and together they began to move toward the alien's central control hub. It was heavily guarded, but that didn't faze him. They had come this far, and the aliens were no longer the unstoppable force they once were. They were disoriented, afraid, and on the verge of collapse. It was time to finish what they had started. As they approached the control hub, John gave a silent command to his squad. They spread out, taking cover behind rubble and debris, preparing to launch their final assault. He could see the alien guards positioned around the perimeter, their alien weapons raised in anticipation. But John wasn't afraid. He knew the key to victory now. He had disrupted their systems once before, but this time would be different. The humans had a weapon the aliens couldn't replicate: creativity. John's mind worked quickly, recalling everything he had learned in his training and everything he had seen during the fight. He could outthink the aliens, and he knew exactly how to use their own technology against them. The human soldiers slowly advanced, taking out the alien guards one by one. The element of surprise was on their side. They had the perfect plan, and they executed it with precision. The alien forces had no idea what was coming. John was the first to reach the control hub. He had a brief moment to observe the alien technology that ran the entire operation, an intricate system of alien machinery, unlike anything he had seen before. But it didn't matter. John had already figured out how to disable it. Using the device he had activated earlier and the knowledge he had gained, he inserted a small chip into the alien system. It was a simple modification, but it was powerful enough to send a shockwave through their network. The alien control center erupted in sparks and flashes of light. The lights flickered, and the walls vibrated as the entire structure went into chaos. The alien systems were failing. Their once advanced technology was being ripped apart by a human-made device. As the alien leaders watched in disbelief from their command posts, John's squad flooded the control room, quickly neutralizing the remaining alien soldiers. The entire operation was crumbling, and General Vrak could do nothing to stop it. The human ingenuity that he had so arrogantly dismissed was now their greatest weapon. Outside, the tide of battle was shifting. The human forces had turned the aliens' own technology against them, and the alien troops were beginning to retreat. John's device had not only disabled their weapons, but it had also completely scrambled their communications. The aliens were in disarray. They had lost their ability to coordinate, and without that control, their forces were being systematically taken down. The humans were winning. They were winning not because they had the most advanced weapons, not because they were stronger, but because they had never given up. The one rule that John had kept in his mind was finally paying off. Humanity's will to survive was proving stronger than any alien empire. As the battle raged on, and the alien forces began to retreat, General Vrak's last-ditch efforts to regain control were futile. The alien leader watched in horror as his fleet, once poised to conquer Earth, began to disband. Their ships took off, but they weren't heading back to the front lines. They were fleeing. John stood among the wreckage of the alien command center, watching the enemy retreat. The tables had turned. Against all odds, humanity had stood strong and triumphed. The alien forces, once so confident of their victory, were now retreating in disarray. But John knew the war wasn't over yet. The aliens might be retreating for now, but this battle had proven something far more important than the outcome of a single fight. It had shown the aliens that humanity could not be crushed, no matter the odds. The aliens had thought they were unbeatable, but they had learned that humans could never be underestimated. As John watched the alien ships disappear into the distance, he felt a surge of pride. They had done it. Humanity had won. And this victory would be remembered for generations to come as a testament to what humans could accomplish when they refused to give up. A surprising victory. The dust was beginning to settle across the battlefield. The fires had started to die down, and the once noisy streets had become eerily quiet. In the distance, the last of the alien ships retreated, disappearing into the vastness of space. The war was over. John stood in the midst of the chaos, his rifle slung across his back. His face was covered in dirt, his uniform torn and bloodied, but there was no mistaking the pride in his eyes. The aliens had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, believing their superior technology would ensure their success. But they had underestimated the one thing that no alien race could ever replicate: the human spirit. Around him, the human soldiers were celebrating. Some were shouting in victory. Others were embracing their comrades, relieved to have survived. But John knew that this victory wasn't just about surviving the battle. It was about something much greater. It was a victory for all of humanity. It was proof that no matter how powerful an enemy was, the strength of the human will could overcome any obstacle. John looked out across the battlefield, his thoughts briefly drifting to the people who had inspired him throughout this fight. His family, his friends, the countless civilians who had stood alongside the soldiers. Even when things looked hopeless, they had all contributed to this victory, in ways big and small. And that was what made humanity truly special: their ability to come together in times of crisis, to fight not just for themselves, but for each other. As the human forces regrouped, they began to assess the damage. The alien technology that had once seemed so powerful was now in ruins. The systems that had controlled their ships, weapons, and armies had all been disabled. The aliens had been brought to their knees not by human firepower, but by human ingenuity, creativity, and resilience. John's mind turned to the alien forces that had retreated. General Vrak and his commanders must have realized by now that their mission had failed. Their defeat would reverberate across the galaxy, a humbling reminder that no matter how far-reaching their empire was, there was one thing they couldn't defeat: the will of a people who refused to give up. Though the immediate threat was over, John knew the war was far from finished. The alien empire would likely try again, and this time they would be even more determined. But humanity had proven something far more significant than just their ability to fight off an invasion. They had proven that they could survive against overwhelming odds, and they would be ready for whatever came next. John turned to his comrades, who were still picking themselves up from the aftermath of the battle. Many of them had lost friends, family, and comrades, but they were still standing. They had faced down an enemy that seemed unbeatable, and they had prevailed. It was a victory, but also a reminder of the price of war. "We did it," one of the soldiers said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion on his face. "We actually did it." John nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "We always knew we could." The battle had been long and brutal, but it had ended with a lesson that would echo throughout history. Humans could not be broken. Their strength didn't come from their weapons or their technology, but from their hearts and minds. The aliens had thought they were dealing with an inferior species, one that would fall to their power. But in the end, it was human resilience that had triumphed. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the devastated city, John stood with his fellow soldiers. There was no sense of victory in the traditional sense. There was too much loss, too much sacrifice. But there was a sense of something more profound: the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. A chapter where they would no longer be victims of anyone's conquest. In the silence that followed, John's mind returned to the one rule that had carried them through. The aliens had forgotten it. They had thought their victory was certain. But humanity had shown them otherwise. Rule number 1: never underestimate the will to survive. As the human forces began the long process of rebuilding, John knew this victory would not be their last. The aliens would return, and next time, they would be better prepared. But humanity, having once again proven their ability to rise above the darkness, would face whatever came next with the same resolve that had secured their place in the galaxy. Because the aliens had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity would never be defeated.